Okay, let's see what ChatGPT says between Buddhism and Jainism. So I got curious the other day and then just thought, okay, why not ask ChatGPT to conduct a debate between these two religions, right? I just wanted to understand. I could have gone through the Wikipedia page, but I thought like this would be a much easier way to understand both the religions, perspective. So let's see what ChatGPT says. Today we're going down a fascinating introduction. So the essence of Buddhism lies in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. We believe that suffering, dukkha, is an inherent part of life, and the cause of this suffering is attachment, desire, and ignorance. The goal is to achieve nirvana, a state of liberation from suffering and cycle of rebirth, which is called samsara, through right understanding, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Buddhism is not theistic, meaning there is no creator God. The focus is on individual effort in overcoming suffering. Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. I'll have to ask what exactly does that mean. Okay. So Jain philosophy, on the other hand, emphasizes the concept of soul. So what does Buddhism say about soul? I don't think. Okay, we'll read further. And the importance of ahimsa in every aspect of life. We believe that every living being has an eternal soul, and the path to liberation involves the purification of the soul from accumulated karmic matter. The ultimate goal is to attain Kevala Jnana, Kevala Jnana, the state of omniscience and liberation by freeing oneself from the bondage of karma. Jainism also asserts a non theistic framework, but we stress a more rigorous commitment to non violence and asceticism in comparison to Buddhism. Okay. So here it says the goal is to achieve nirvana. So here is Kevala Jnana, the bondage of karma, also a cycle of rebirth. Understanding. So Buddhism is more to do with the liberating oneself from the cycle of rebirth rather than karma. Is that the case? And Jainism is more about freeing oneself from the bondage of karma. Okay, so path to enlightenment. In Buddhism, the Eightfold Path provides a practical framework for attaining into which is divided into three main categories: morality, meditation, and wisdom. The emphasis is on moderation, avoiding extremes, which we call the middle way. Aha! The process of liberation is gradual and it involves personal effort through ethical living, meditation, and insight. Okay, avoiding extremes. I see. Okay. Jainism also has a clear path to liberation, which is rooted in the practice of right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct. So you're often referred to as the three jewels. The path involves renouncing worldly attachments and practicing severe asceticism to rid oneself of karmic bonds. Core practice in Jainism is a rigorous observance of ahimsa, not only in action but also in speech and thought. Only through a complete purification of the soul, through self discipline and ascetic practices, can one achieve liberation. Hmm. So here it is: morality, meditation, and wisdom. And the idea is to live in moderation. And here it is, it's kind of extreme. So here, Buddhism is, I think, recommending moderation, whereas Jainism is recommending like extreme non-violence. This is kind of an extreme, isn't it? Right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct. Okay. View of the universe and cosmology. In Buddhism, universe is seen as impermanent and in a constant state of flux. There is no permanent, unchanging self. no Atman, and everything is interdependent. The universe operates on the principle of dependent origination. Pratitya samutpada, meaning all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions. There are realms of existence, including hells, heavens, and human realms, but they are all subject to the cycle of samsara. Buddhism views the universe as vast but ultimately without a permanent or external essence. Impermanent and a constant state of flux without a permanent or eternal essence. I'm not sure what that means. Okay. Jain cosmology presents a more structured view of the universe. It is divided into three realms: the upper world, where gods and liberators will reside; the middle world, the human and animal realms; and the lower world, where hellish being exists. The universe is seen as eternal and uncreated, with no beginning or end. Unlike Buddhism, which tends to focus on impermanence, holds that the universe is eternal. And what changes are the souls that evolve through the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. Every soul's liberation is tied to the purification and freedom from karma. Hmm. So, if I have to summarize, I still don't understand what this impermanence means. Impermanence is like not permanent, right? It's not permanent. But permanence would mean forever existing. I can. So it implies that it doesn't exist forever, which means it goes through birth and death the same way humans go through birth and death. Impermanence is a very interesting choice of word to use. Dependent origination is due to causes and conditions. There are realms of existence, including hells and Vishnu, but they are also due to the cycle of samsara. Hmm. This is a bit more complicated. I don't completely understand this. This is a bit straightforward. So, what I understand, the takeaway would be, universe is not eternal. That's what I think Buddhism says, and Jainism says this universe is eternal. Okay, let's go to the concept of soul. Denies the existence of an external unchanging self. External unchanging self, that means the soul, is it? Instead, we assert the concept of anatta or anatman, being no self. Human experience is seen as a combination of five aggregates from form, sensation, perception, mental formulation, and consciousness. These aggregates are impermanent and subject to change. There is no permanent soul that exists independently of these aggregates. Realization of anatta is central to Buddhism as it helps to eliminate attachment and suffering. The realization of anatta is central to Buddhist enlightenment as it helps to eliminate attachment and suffering. So I think Buddhism says soul exists only because these other things exist. That's what I understand from this statement. So because form exists, because sensation exists, because perception exists, because mental formation, consciousness exists, soul exists. If none of these exist, soul would cease to exist. That's what I understand from this statement. So in contrast, Jainism strongly believes in the existence of the soul. as eternal and distinct from the body. The soul is the true self, and its true nature is pure consciousness. Unlike in Buddhism, Jains believe that the soul retains its individuality through countless lifetimes undergoing cycles of birth and death. The soul's journey is hindered by the accumulation of karma which attaches to the soul. Liberation is the result of purging this karma, which ultimately allows the soul to achieve omniscience and transcend its material existence. So I don't completely understand what omniscience is. State of knowing everything. Okay. Okay. Asceticism and non-violence. So this is moderation and avoid extremes. Practiced severe asceticism early in his life, but later discovered that a balanced approach was the most effective. We do not advocate for extreme ascetic practices, but ethical living and meditation are central to the path of enlightenment. Ahimsa is also fundamental in Buddhism, particularly in how we relate to others and how we live our lives, but the focus is more on mental discipline and mindfulness rather than severe physical asceticism. Jainism, however, places an incredibly strong emphasis on asceticism and non-violence. We believe that all forms of life, from the smallest microorganisms to humans, have souls. Oh, and we must avoid harming them in any way, physically, verbally, or mentally. Jains typically practice vegetarianism, and many also follow a very strict diet that avoids harm to even the smallest organisms. Asceticism is seen as a key practice in purifying the soul, and some Jains go to great lengths to avoid causing harm, including wearing masks to prevent inhaling insects. We view nonviolence as not just as a moral principle but as a spiritual necessity for liberation. Okay, what is interesting? Mm, does Buddhism, I think, okay, according to Buddhism, do animals apart from humans have souls? The concept of a soul is different from many other traditions because Buddhism does not believe in a permanent, unchanging soul or self. Instead, Buddhism teaches the concept of anatta. So, according to this view, there is no eternal, unchanging essence of soul within any living being, whether he, however, does recognize sentience in all living beings, including animals. All sentient beings, from humans to animals, experience a cycle of samsara. This context, while animals do not have an eternal, unchanging soul, they are still beings that undergo rebirth based on their karma, just like humans. Rebirth could be in various realms of existence, and the cycle of suffering applies to all sentient beings, not just humans. Okay. Animals accumulate karma according to okay. Hmm. Conduct further debate based on the argument provider provide the best option rate them based on the scientific conception of the universe. Okay, this is interesting. Buddhism does not propose the universe was created in any conventional sense. There is no creator god or prime mover. The universe is viewed as arising from causes and conditions, and its structure and existence are impermanent. It operates in cycles such as kalpas, which are vast periods of time. During these cycles, the universe undergoes phases of formation, existence, and dissolution, but each phase is temporary. The notion of empty or illusory nature of phenomena is a central part of Buddhism, called this cosmology. Universe and everything in it have no inherent existence. They exist only because of dependent origination. Is eternal. The universe has no beginning or end and has always existed in its present form. It is self-regulating and is not created or destroyed. The Jain universe is structured into specific regions with different planes of existence. Souls are at the center of this eternal cosmos, and their journey through various forms, human, animal, plant, or divine, is determined by the karma they accumulate. Jain cosmology does not involve a destruction or recreation of universe. Instead, it is seen as a timeless system with an orderly cycle of evolution. Frameworks and discuss their relevance in the context of modern scientific cosmology. This cosmological view aligns with modern scientific understanding in certain aspects. The idea that the universe is impermanent, constantly evolving, and dependent on causes and conditions reflects modern scientific theories like the Big Bang and the expanding universe. The Buddhist view of emptiness and dependent origination mirrors the scientific understanding that the universe is in constant flux and the phenomena arise independently. There is no fixed or permanent state, and the universe evolves over vast time scales, which aligns well with contemporary cosmological models of an expanding universe. The concept of entropy and the cyclical nature of time proposed in some theories of physics. Okay, on the other hand, is much more in line with an eternal static view of the universe, which is not currently supported by modern scientific cosmology. Okay, the concept that the universe has always existed and will always exist without any beginning or end contradicts the scientific understanding of a finite universe that began with the Big Bang. The Jain idea of universe divided into fixed realms also doesn't correspond to current astronomical observations, which show that space is vast, expanding, and not structured in the way Jain cosmology describes. However, Jainism's notion of order in the universe and the understanding of karma affecting the soul's experience remains an intriguing metaphysical framework. Let's rate these cosmologies based on their compatibility with this rating. Buddhism's Buddhism's view of the universe is quite compatible with the modern scientific cosmology. The impermanence and flux of the universe echo the scientific understanding of an evolving cosmos. The Buddhist idea of dependent origin aligns with the interconnectedness seen in quantum physics and the idea that everything arises due to causes and conditions. The Buddhism's metaphysical view on emptiness and no self may not align fully with central scientific materialism, but the overall framework fits well within the dynamic and evolving nature of the universe described by modern science. 8 out of 10 is is impressive. Jain cosmology with its eternal unchanging universe does not align well with the scientific view of the universe, which is based on the Big Bang and a finite expanding universe. Fixed realms and the eternal structure contradicts the scientific understanding of a universe that is dynamic, evolving, and expanding. While Jainism ethical views and emphasis on non-violence are important, metaphysical than empirical. Okay, so I need to understand another thing, right? Mm, there are different realms in the universe. What do you mean by realms according to Buddhism? So, planes of existence that beings can be reborn into. Based on the so planes of existence that beings can be reborn into based on their karma. These realms are often described as part of the cycle of samsara, the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, in which all sentient beings are caught until they achieve liberation. The six realms in Buddhist cosmology are commonly divided into the following categories, each representing different kinds of existence. Gods, celestial beings who experience great pleasure, happiness, and luxury. Beings in these realms are said to have long lifespans and live in a state of bliss, but they are still bound by samsara and are not free from suffering. Whoa. Despite their superior existence, they are not immune to the cycle of rebirth and will eventually fall into lower realms when their good karma runs out. Oh, damn. Even the gods? Wow. Okay, the realm of the Asuras. So powerful, jealous, and often engaged in conflicts. Sometimes depicted as beings who live in a state of tension and competition filled with ambition and desire for power. While they may possess great strength or wealth, they are also subject to suffering and struggle with their desires and insecurities. Suras often represent a middle ground between gods and beings in lower realms. Hmm. To occupy a special position in Buddhist cosmology, it's seen as having a unique balance between pleasure and suffering, offering the best opportunity for spiritual practice and the pursuit of enlightenment. Oh. So human is considered a rare and precious opportunity because unlike animals or lower beings, humans have the ability to practice the Dharma, develop wisdom, and ultimately achieve liberation. Okay. Beings in the animal realm experience life based on instinct and are primarily motivated by basic desires like food, safety, and reproduction. They are often portrayed as being less aware of their spiritual potential and are driven by immediate physical needs. This realm is seen as a lower state of existence, but animals, like all beings, are subject to the law of karma and can be reborn into different realms based on their action. The hungry ghost realm. This realm often describes as having intense cravings and desires that they cannot satisfy, often with large empty stomachs and tiny mouths, unable to consume enough to satisfy their hunger. Suffering due to excessive attachment, desire, and greed in their past lives. A symbol of insatiable desire and spiritual emptiness. Wow. The lowest realm of Buddhist cosmology and reasonable beings who experience intense suffering and torment can vary in intensity and type with beings undergoing different forms of suffering based on the negative karma. Hells are not eternal. Beings in these realms will eventually be reborn into higher realms when the negative karma has been exhausted, but they may experience longer periods of suffering. All these realms are part of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Being so born into different realms based on their past actions, the karma. The goal is to transcend samsara. So the realms are not strictly separate. Beings can move between them depending on their actions. For example, being in the human realm will accumulate karma that leads to be reborn as an animal, or they can catch a higher realm. Karma plays a central role in determining which realm a being is reborn into good actions. So, can a human from a human realm interact with an animal from an animal realm? Generally do not interact in the way that we typically understand interaction. States of existence and being within each realm experience reality in different ways due to their varying levels of consciousness perception. Have a higher level of awareness, reasoning, and spiritual potential. They can engage in complex thought process, practice dharma, and cultivate wisdom. More instinctual and limited consciousness, their awareness is focused on basic survival, like finding food, avoiding danger, everything. They don't have the same experiences of beings in different realms are thought to be fundamental. For example, a human may be able to perceive the world in a more complex and detailed way. We see the world through a lens of basic sensory experience. While humans might perceive animals as distinct beings, animals might not have the same consciousness of humans, and their interaction will be limited to basic animals such as fear and curiosity. Such as Mahayana, there is belief that all that beings in all realms are interconnected due to the shared existence in samsara. Thus, a human might not directly interact with an animal in terms of communication or spiritual exchange, but they may influence each other through the karmic. As well, humans' compassion moments can lead to positive karmic outcomes for both the human and the animal. While direct conscious interaction between human and animal in the sense of spiritual exchange is not common, humans certainly interact with animals in the physical world. Humans might care for animals, offer them food, etc. These interactions are influenced by the human's karma and are opportunities for the humans to practice compassion. Okay. Is realm. So these realms coexist on Earth. Such as animals, hungry goes, are not considered separate physical locations that coexist in a literal geography. Rather, the represent different states of existence and states of consciousness that beings can experience, often described in terms of psychological, emotional, spiritual conditions. Samsara. It's metaphorical and existential rather than as distinct physical locations on Earth. Okay, so understood in relation to our world, physiological, psychological, and existential states, experiences, or states of mind that beings may undergo depending on their actions. Suffering, joy, and the opportunity for spiritual growth. The hell realms might experience intense suffering and torment, often driven by negative emotions, anger, or hatred. Hmm. Hmm. So, does it mean everybody, starting from the gods to asuras to humans to beings in hell, and they are all here, but just the way they experience the suffering, just the way they go through the emotion is different. So basically, it's not like a different physical location. Generally, not spatial. Oh, and a specific physical places on Earth instead. States of existence. Different times during samsara. Oh, exists within the universe. The realms exist within the universe, but they are understood to be realms of existence that beings can be reborn into based on their karma. For example, after death, a person might be reborn as human, an animal, or another type of being, depending on the community. Interpenetrating. Okay, what is the point of these realms? Okay, what happens during liberation? After nirvana is achieved. Rebirth ends. Permanent end to the cycle of samsara. Shivravan was freed from the cycle of samsara. He passed away in a state of complete parinirvana, the final complete nirvana after death, as he no longer had the karmic conditions to take rebirth. After achieving nirvana, the concept of a permanent, unchanging self or soul is fully transcended. The illusion of self disappears, and the individual realizes that the sense of I or me is simply a mental construct. So, nirvana no longer experiences themselves as a separate, isolated entity. Attachment to self and the experience of the interconnection of this is a state of profound wisdom and compassion. Wow. So, so there is no I or he or like so. Oh, sheesh. So the final state of nirvana attained by enlightening beings such as Buddha at the time of their death, a complete cessation of the cycle of samsara for an enlightened being. Passed away, he entered parinirvana, meaning he was no longer subject to rebirth. A fully enlightened being's body might be physically gone, but the state of nirvana remains eternal. Continue to guide beings to the power. Okay. Is no longer subject to rebirth. This does not mean that they stop caring about others. Although a being who has attained nirvana is no longer subject to rebirth, this does not mean that they stop caring about others or they are indifferent. What? So if there is no self, where does this come from? Where does the they come from? That's a bit confusing. May continue to work for the well being of others. Who? They? But the day is gone. Like there is no day after nirvana, isn't it? Bodhisattvas who vow to remain in samsara to help others attain liberation. Oh, are said to choose to stay in the cycle of samsara out of compassion, even though they have the power to enter parinirvana. They choose to guide sentient beings towards enlightenment. Wow. So personal liberation it also marks the end of the ego or self-centered desire to escape suffering, allowing for the possibility of universal compassion towards others. Beyond conceptualization, beyond ordinary human experience, words, concepts, and dualities cannot fully describe what nirvana is often in negative terms, the cessation of suffering, the extinction of desire, the state beyond qualities. Nirvana cannot be explained with words, sometimes that can only be directly experienced. They transcend the need for concepts or dualistic thinking, and thus description would be inadequate. Okay. No rebirth, end of suffering, realization of the true nature, reality including all things, no more ego or self, illusion of a permanent separate dissolve, and there is a deep realization of non-self. Okay, but okay, the illusion of a permanent separate self is dissolved. So I'm trying to understand when you say illusion of a permanent separate self is involved. So there is something, but that something doesn't identify itself as separate anymore. It feels connected to everything else. Is that it? Is my understanding? I thought the self disintegrates, but that's not the case apparently. If- See, initially I thought like if there is no self, that probably means I I think that the idea itself is not anymore, but it's not the physical self. The physical self still exists. I think, isn't it? Cannot be fully described using words. Compassion, even after reaching nirvana, enlightened beings may continue to exhibit great compassion working. Yeah, so I believe if so, so the self still physically exists, but the idea of self is dissolved. Exactly. The self physically exists in the sense that the body remains the concept of the self, the ego, or individual entity is dissolved. So Buddhist teaching Anatman, the permanent, independent, and unchanging self is an illusion. The person who has attained will still have a physical body, eat, sleep, and perform everyday activities just as before. However, the idea is that it no longer clings to the idea of self as a permanent separate entity. For example, the body may still age, experience sensation, go through the natural process of life. The person no longer identifies within the way that ordinary beings do. They understand that the body is impermanent and subject to change, just like everything else. The illusion of permanent self. Most beings identify with their thoughts, feelings, memories, and a physical body. This self is a separate self, least to attachment. However, Buddha thought that there is no permanent unchanging self. All things, including our sense of self, are impermanent. This means that the identity we hold on to is not the self. When an enlightened person attains nirvana, they have deeply realized and experienced that the sense of self is merely an illusion. Clinging to this illusion disappears. In other words, and continue to function idea for one. So when karma and rebirth, hmm, samsara is rebirth due to karma. Okay. Um, Buddhism does not believe in soul. So, what exactly is being reborn? What is being reborn, samsara? If there is no permanent soul, is an important one. To understand this, we need to explore the Buddhist teachings on anatta. The doctrine of anatta teaches there is no permanent changing self in any being. Instead, what we think of a self is a continuum of changing processes. It can pass away moment by moment. However, there's a continuity of existence, a kind of process of becoming that is influenced by previous actions. It's not a soul, but rather a stream of consciousness, mind stream, that carries the results of karma from one life to the next. Wow. Wow. That it is the mind stream or consciousness that undergoes rebirth. It's made up of a series of ever changing thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and mental states. While this mind stream is not a permanent self, it's passed on to does not carry a fixed self into the next life. Instead, the karma creates an imprint, creates a rebirth of consciousness, a transfer of karmic potential rather than a transfer of an individual soul from one life to the next, like a flame passing from one candle to another. Oh, wow. Rupa. Constantly changing, and none of them presents a permanent self. We think of as an I or me is actually just a combination of these aggregates and that they are impermanent. This is so profound, bro. It was not a soul or a permanent self, but the karmic imprint carried in the mind stream, which is influenced by the sheesh. This is crazy. Imagine a candle burning and then a new candle being lit from the original one. The new candle is not the same as the original one, yet it shares the same flame, the causal continuity of one candle to the next. Its consciousness is like the flame of the first candle. The next life's consciousness is the flame of the second candle. But no permanent soul or self is passed along. The concept of rebirth is different from reincarnation as in some other spiritual traditions like Hinduism, that a soul or a permanent self is passed on to a new body, whereas in Buddhism, rebirth is the continuation of a mind stream influenced by karma, but without any permanent, unchanging soul or self being transferred from one life to next. The self or soul is an illusion created by our attachment to the aggregates which are constantly changing. What is reborn in Buddhism is not a permanent soul, rather a continuum of consciousness. Mind stream carries the karmic results of past actions. Is the mind stream consciousness physical? Does the mind stream of consciousness have a physical form? Vijnana, in the way that our body or material objects, it is considered to be a non-material mental phenomenon. The mind stream is a continuous flow of consciousness that experience sensations, thoughts, perception, mental formations. It is often described as the stream of awareness or mental continuum. It's one of 5 aggregates, but it is not seen as a physical entity. It is the aspect of an individual existence, experiences, and process of the world, and it is intimately tied to personality. It's not a fixed identity or a permanent self. Instead, it is a succession of moment-to-moment experiences, constantly changing and influenced by. So non-physical because it does not have a material form. The body is composed of physical matter. Consciousness is not made up of any material substance. It's not reducible. So process alone, okay, interpretation of the body by the mind does not have a so it interacts with the body is conditioned by it. Okay, even on the physical brain, it is believed that the conscious condition does not entirely depend on the physical brain, and it is believed that consciousness continues after death. So, about a new form influenced by the karma. Causal continuity. Other existence. Does the mind have energy? Said there is a type of energy as mental activity in Buddhism. Could be seen as having a kind of energetic quality where states can drive actions and influence the mind stream. In the practice of samadhi, mind stream becomes more focused and unified. It should be seen as a kind of mental energy that drives one toward deeper insight and liberation. Meditative energy or effort is often referred to as energy needed to overcome distractions. What does say about dimensions?